Hi there, I'm Dani, spiritualtherapist.com. And today I'm just so thrilled to be able to bring you number one, a really special friend of mine. I'll tell you how I met her actually. I met this beautiful woman, Jackie Haugh, years ago in my capacity as a spiritual therapist. And as a therapist also, we're trained, you can't get too emotionally connected to patient or the person that you're working with. And so you learn not to jump that boundary and, protect and take care of people in the right way. But there was something about Jackie. I did a spiritual reading for her. And there was just something about her sparkle, her light, her vibrancy, her heart. And I actually did make that step over. And we've laughed about it, Jackie, haven't we, over the years? It was very taboo for me to do that. But I'm so delighted that 8-9 years later, we're still very dear friends to each other, and that I can actually bring your body of work to my audience and further expand, into yours. So with any further ado, this is Jackie Haugh. She is a mother, a granddaughter, a end-of-life doula. And for anyone that doesn't know what that is, Jackie is that person, that angel that you would want with your parent if you couldn't be there with them, to help them into the next life, to be a loving light and a kind source, speaking life into them as life is leaving them. That is an end-of-life doula. And this broadcast here is about Jackie Haugh's book, and her book is called The Promise I Kept. And the promise she kept was to her father. And she promised her father she would never put him into a senior living arrangement or an old people's home, as we call it in Great Britain and Europe. And she never did do that. She did keep her promise to her father. And so now I'm going to introduce my friend and author, Jackie Haugh. Hi, Jackie.
Hi, Dani. Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show. This is such a treat to see you and just to be able to share my message. I really appreciate this.
It's my absolute pleasure. And I saw you last year, this time in the winter in the mountains, somewhere in America, where we joyfully walked around up and down mountains and putting the world to rights and sitting with a glass of wine at night and sharing ourselves and our life stories. And then here we are a year later and now ready to, really progress into your story and share it with others. So I would love you to hold up your book, The Promise I Kept, please. Okay, if you could bring it closer to camera so we can see exactly the promise I kept, my journey with Dad from home care through hospice. And Jackie Madden Haugh. Looks like Haugh or Haugh. There's different ways of pronouncing your last name, but it's Haugh. And if we can just look a bit closer at that photograph, Jackie, that is a very special photograph to you. And can you tell us why, please?
My father was always my favorite dance partner from the time I was a child. I grew up with 3 brothers, and life was pretty crazy in our house. And my dad was a very quiet man. My mom was the daughter of silent movie actors, so she talked all the time. My dad never talked. But the one connection that Dad and I had was through dance. And so as a little person, he'd pick me up and twirl me around. And then when I got a little older, I stood on his feet. And then when I got even older, it was the high school father-daughter dances. And they were so special for him and I. And then going forward, there'd be weddings or whatever, but he was always my favorite dance partner. He was a terrible dancer, but I just loved dancing with him. I would just twirl around him and he'd kind of stand there like the pole. And because he really didn't know what he was doing, but he just loved being out there with me. And I know he was uncomfortable, but he would do it anyway. And so this picture, it was the last dance we had together. It was my niece's wedding, and he was able to get there in his wheelchair. And everyone's out there dancing, and I was out there dancing with my brothers. And I looked over and he was sitting in his wheelchair, and I thought, oh, no, you have to dance too. So I went over and I grabbed his hand and I danced around him like I did when I was younger. And then my daughter is the one behind him. And so she pushed him out into the dance floor, and we just danced all night long. It was just so sweet. It was just a very, very precious moment for both of us.
And it's amazing. And isn't it so wonderful that somebody captured that moment, that forever moment?
Yeah.
There was no posing, there was no preparation. It was just like in the moment. And it's the cover of your book, and it just speaks volumes.
Yeah. No, it's a very, very special photo to me, because it brings back everything we were together, who we were as a father and daughter team. Um, just the love in his eyes and me just being so happy in that picture.
Yeah, that's amazing. So growing up with your mum and dad, were they strict parents?
Um, yes and no. It was the 1950s and 60s. So there were, I wouldn't say strict expectations. We had, we were expected to behave ourselves in public. We were expected to follow our Catholic faith, which I struggled with. We were expected to be kind and moral and loving, but it wasn't too bad. My dad, no, there was no control issues with him. My mother was a little controlling in that she, who we are out in the world reflected on her, she took as her being a mother. So if we looked perfect, if our hair was perfect, if we wore the right clothes, and people fawned over us because we were such beautiful children, in a sense, she took that as she was being a good mother. And so there were strong expectations that we always look our best when we leave the house. We may come home a mess, but when we left, we always said, and that got a little heavy for me because as a child, being the only girl, my brothers could get away with running around in play clothes, but I always had to be in a frilly dress. And she would make me wear 2 ponytails on the side of my head till I was in 6th grade. I mean, my hair was all the way down my back, but I still had these 2 ponytails, when girls are starting to play with their looks. And she just, and I knew not to fight it because it could become a fight till finally though in 6th grade, I'm like, please, Mom, can I cut this off? I just want to wear a flip, So she finally realized, okay, she's growing up. I got to let her go. And then she softened as the years went by. You still got a sense of her control issues, wanting things to be the way she wants them. But as the years went by, she did start to release some of that. So lots of expectations, but I wouldn't say highly disciplined.
Right. How old is 6th grade in American school systems?
I think it's about 12 or 13.
Yeah, so it's such an age where we're just fighting to get out of our, we've got these raging hormones, etc.
Yeah.
I think that your mum was so particular about how you were presented to the world, and that created a form of identification for her. Like she was identifying who she was in the world through the beauty that you are and were, and your brother.
Yeah. No, exactly. And growing up with silent movie actors, my grandmother and my grandfather, but we're both in the industry. When you're in that industry, I mean, when you're on camera, you have to look perfect. You have to look your best. My daughter, Michelle, was an actress for a while, and it got to be too much because she was always had to be thin. The hair had to be blonde. You have to have the package. And I think my mom took a lot of that because my grandmother would want her to look her best all the time. And so it was one of those pieces that kept getting pushed down the line and dumped on me. But when I had my children, I stopped it. I got to dress them up on Christmas and on Easter. The rest of the time they dressed themselves, and some of the outfits were like, oh my God. But I tried not to be so controlling about their looks and their hair. And for whatever reason, the compliments that we children had towards my mother made her feel very special. But it was all about us. It wasn't about her. Right. And which later, when I got to be a woman, it made me sad to think that she got all of her validation through her children. And she was such a bright, incredible woman. I wish she had gotten it for herself.
Right. And also a sign of that's at the times as well, there was a lot more feminine repression and expectation, which thank goodness have died the death they need to, So, wow, that's just incredible. So with your dad, obviously you adored and loved him very much. Can you remember the very first things that he brought to you in terms of teaching you, or like, what are your first memories of interaction with him?
Well, like I said, as a child, he was very quiet. I mean, growing up with him, I always knew he loved me just by the way he would look at me, and was proud of anything that I did. And he would always tell me, you're going to be just fine. When I would go through one of my things, he'd go, stop, you're going to be just fine. And I never understood it as a kid. Right. And then, and like I said, my mother was a talker and she was a verbal historian. She never stopped talking about her parents, her childhood, my uncle, it was all about this big life that they had together. So I really knew the family history of that side. I knew nothing about my dad's. And then when I was 18, and we would go to these dances and have a wonderful time, but there still wasn't that verbal connection. There was always the heart connection, but not the verbal. And then when I was 18, my mom went on a trip with my grandmother. So I was the woman of the house, meaning I had to heat up the frozen dinners because I couldn't cook. And so this one night, it was just Dad and I, and he when he was eating, he wanted to eat, he didn't want to talk. And I can still remember him shoveling food in his mouth and just looking at him and saying, Dad, stop. We have to talk. And he's like, what? And so I said, I know nothing about your life. I know nothing about your childhood. You know, you grew up poor. You grew up in San Francisco with Irish Catholic immigrant parents. You went through the Depression. You went through the war. You know, you went through all these things that Mom constantly talks about. But I don't know if it affected you the same way. You know, the Depression really affected my mother and her need for money, or to know that money was there. My dad never said a word about it. And he looked at me and he said, you know, yes, it was very hard, but it was hard for everybody. And then all of a sudden he started opening up. And he told me about his childhood, his friends and his parents. And that's when I knew he really loved me. He was going to talk to me and not eat his dinner. And when it was all done, I said, Dad, why didn't you ever tell me these things before? And he just looked at me and goes, no one ever asked. And I thought, wow, for some people, we need to be asked, you know, we're not just going to dump on people. We're not just, if you want to know, ask me, I will tell you everything. So that was the beginning, the chipping away of our relationship to becoming grown-ups together and really talking about things. And for many years, he was like my business consultant, you know, and I was going through things with business, and we just grew closer and closer and closer. It was a very sweet, loving relationship where my mom was too, but my mom was like so full of energy. So it was lovely to sit with my father sometimes and just go, because there was a lot of energy in our house.
That's amazing. So let's cut to the year that your mother passed.
Right.
When your mother passed, how did it impact your dad initially, apart from, I would assume, heartbreak and grief, but how did he function in the house without her?
So my dad had a massive stroke at 68. And so he was 86 when she died. So he'd been, you know, disabled for over almost 20 years. He learned to walk again, very slow with a cane. His left arm,
Sorry, darling. When he had his stroke, was your mother still alive?
Yes. Yeah. So for the next 20 years, yeah. And so his left arm was dead. He, you know, he got his facial features back and he learned to walk. But my mom had been sick for many years before she died, and I was taking care of her. And because he couldn't do anything. So I was running back and forth. It took me over a half hour each way to get to their house and help. And sometimes it was 3 or 4 times a day I was running up there. But when she passed, he did what he always does. He went quiet. I know he mourned her loss. I know he missed her, but he had such an amazing faith in the universe. You know, for him, it was his Catholic faith. But as I got to know him, I often thought, you are more a Buddhist than you are a Catholic, but he would have freaked out if I had told him that. Yeah. But just his acceptance, and it's going to be okay, and this is life, and I'm going to mourn, I'm going to cry, and then I'm going to move forward. You know, I'm just, what can I do with the rest of my life type of thing. So I know he missed her terribly. And everybody said, oh, your dad will die within 6 months because, you know, he'd had this massive stroke and he's going to be gone within 6 months. He lived another 9 years.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah.
So after she passed, did you continue driving the 30 to 45 minutes per day, every day to him?
Right. So what happened before she died, my grandmother had moved in with them too. And they tried to take care of her. They did as much as they could. And then with my dad's stroke and my mother's failing health, back then you didn't bring people into the home, right? You did it, or you put them in an institution or a nursing home or whatever you want to call them these days. And so the first place they put my grandmother in was lovely. It was someone's home and she had her own bedroom. But I think there was something with the county that went wrong and they closed it down. So she ended up in a nursing home. And so this one day I was taking my dad to go visit her, and where he's hobbling up the wheelchair ramp to go in, and he had this panic attack and started shaking. And I thought, my God, what's going on? And I grabbed him. And I said, Dad, what's wrong? And he goes, promise me you never do this to me. Promise me I never go into a nursing home. And, you know, in that moment, number one, I was the mother to 4 small children. You know, that part of our life was, in my mind, 50 years away. And I wanted him calm. So I hugged him and I said, Dad, this will never happen to you. I was still married at the time. I said, I promise you this will never happen to you. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I'll never be called, because the men in our family died first. Everyone was expecting him to have another massive stroke that would take him out. And so I made this promise. And now fast forward 13 years, my grandmother was now gone. My mom had just passed. I remember sitting there looking at him in the room with my mom dying and thinking, yikes, what's going to happen to Dad? So that's when I stepped in. So from that point, for the next 9 years, life was Dad and I. And I was fortunate in that I found some home care where I didn't have to move in with him, or he didn't have to live with me for 7 of those years. And at first he could handle some hours alone in the house because he could do a few things for himself. But after 2 years, we needed more care. And then it got to be 24-hour care. And so, but I was going up there every single day to make sure things were okay, to do his bills, to read his mail to him. He was going blind as well. Wow. And so yeah, for 7 years, I mean, and I had to catch him when he was awake, because at this point he's getting much older, and older people sleep a lot. Yeah. And so I'd go to work. I'd look at the clock and go, God, I got to go see Dad. I'd go see Dad, stay with him for a few hours till he fell asleep again, then go back to work. And so my life for 7 years was just so disjointed. And then finally, after 7 years, I began to watch what was really going on in the house. And there wasn't senior abuse. I mean, he was well taken care of and all that, but she was a lovely woman, but she started bringing all of her friends in. And so before you know it, there were parties going on in the house, and my dad's sitting in the living room with nobody to talk to. And when I caught this going on, I said, that's it, we're done. You're moving in with me. You know, you're going to live with me.
You know, you raise a really good point, Jackie. And it's something that, even though it's going to be difficult for people to really accept, you know, sorry, so sad, too bad, or too bad, so sad, because we're grown-ups and we have to have awareness of what is happening in the elder sector. Now, we can't even quantify really what an elder is these days, because our bodies are biogenetically, organically designed to live to 120 years. So we are now living longer and longer and longer. Oh yeah. But it's just the programming that the governments of the world upset us with, like, you know, retire at 65, die at 72, like how rude, how dare they? But my point in going there is an underground pandemic of senior abuse going on in every level of society, in every country, and in every possible imaginable way. And it is horrible to raise it. But even more now, in this time of fear and ill health, and people taking medicines or not taking medicines in their body, whether they want them or not, we need to highlight that, you know, people who've put their parents in elder situations may want to reconsider. And that is why, in particular, I'm speaking to my beautiful friend, Jackie Haugh, who wrote the book, The Promise I Kept, regarding this very situation. Now, what we're going to do is go into the time frame where Jackie brought her father, her beloved father, into her home full-time and became his full-time 24/7 carer. Jackie, can you tell us how that impacted life at the very beginning, how it impacted your 4 children, and how it impacted your boyfriends, lovers, etc.?
Well, when I first brought him in, I thought, no problem, you know, and I did keep one of the caregivers for a few hours a day because I couldn't lift him in and out of bed. But say from 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock the next day, it was Dad and I. This woman was there for just a few hours. And I thought, no problem, he'll sleep all the time, you know. And I prepared the house. I got a wheelchair ramp for it and everything. And I made sure he had all the supplies he was going to need. I did not prepare myself for the emotional part of what this was going to do to all of us. Um, I mean, the very first night I had to change his diaper and I hadn't been trained in it and I flunked. I had to tape them back together again because I couldn't get the whole thing on correctly. And I started crying. And like my dad would always do, he'd look at me and just say, honey, you did just fine. And I said, Dad, I promise tomorrow I'll get this right. But what I wasn't prepared for was, number one, what it would do to my children. I didn't think about that. They were all grown and gone. They rarely came home. One of my daughters lost her bedroom through it. And of all my kids, she's the most like me. And I thought this would be no problem because she's just so sweet and giving. And, you know, she just gives away everything in her life. She broke down and cried that she wasn't going to have a bedroom anymore. And I thought, you're 24 years old. You don't come home anyway. And then it came out. It wasn't so much that she wouldn't have a bedroom. She was afraid he was going to die in there. And then she'd never be able to go back in that room. And I thought, wow, I did not think this through. I did not think about all the things that this would do to the kids. You know, when they came home, it was uncomfortable for them to come home because the house smelled now. It's a different kind of smell, right? With older people, whether it's their body, their breath, the diapers, even though you get them out of the house right away, it's still in the house. He was deaf, going deaf. So the TV, when it was on, was full blast. And the only thing he watched anymore was his Catholic channel. So that did not go over well with my kids. And and also with the caregiver there, she would, when she was on with my dad, she did a great job, but then she'd go and sleep in a chair. And that's kind of creepy. You know, you're walking in your house, person like a blob sitting in a chair sound asleep, and I'm there too, but it just became very uncomfortable for the kids. And they would come because they wanted to see him, but they weren't coming home very often. It was very hard on them. And then for me, what I wasn't prepared for was the isolation that comes with this. You know, I took care of him from 3 o'clock in the afternoon to 9 o'clock the next morning. I couldn't go anywhere. You know, I was a very social person. I had lots of friends. I was dating this guy and all that stopped. And the minute I brought my father into the house, this guy I was dating stopped calling me. And we'd been dating for 2 years. Just stopped, just went away. And I wasn't prepared for the fatigue. And it's not like you're really busy all the time, but there's a dullness to the day, you know, when you've got someone who sleeps most of it and you're trying to figure out, well, what do I do now? What do I do now with my day that I'm stuck here? And fortunately, I'm a very artistic person. So I tried to be creative, but I lost all my creativity. I lost all my income. I was still trying to sell real estate, but I couldn't function the way I normally do. You know, you have to be able to jump when the clients want you, and I couldn't. So, and then I wasn't prepared for how angry I got at my brothers. I have 3 brothers. One, sadly, is totally dysfunctional. So you can't count on him for anything. And the other 2 live far away. So, you know, my anger was more at the situation, not them, because they came when I asked them to come. But, you know, I had no help. Yeah. And I got very, very lonely. And there's a lot I learned from it that I share with people going forward. You know, there's stopgaps along the way. I did a podcast on the whole series a little while ago too, of tips for people that are thinking about doing this, or if they're in the throes of it. Right. You know, there are self-preservation things you can do for yourself to make it easier. I just was stubborn and thought, no, I'm going to do it all myself. Right. And that's stupid. We're never alone.
That podcast that you mentioned, I want to make sure that we include that link in the details underneath this broadcast when we upload it to YouTube, because obviously this is what we're doing. We're trying to bring as much help than reality, and a reality check for people who may be considering it, who wish they'd done it, who think they should do it, and some of the things to look at down the path. Now, one area that I would like to go into, which is extremely uncomfortable for most people, because most of us could never imagine changing our dad's diaper, nappy, our mum's diaper or nappy. In Britain, we call them nappies. Americans, Canadians, diapers, and the rest of the world has their own, combination of the two. Yeah, I remember my mum and dad, they're still alive and they're not old. They're in their 70s. I'm like, I'm so done with, oh, you're 70. Or when someone says, I'm 86, woohoo, well done. Maybe like 50 years ago, that was a big deal because of starvation, wars and famines and global resets, etc. But in this day and age, like, we get to 120, then we'll go, yeah, you. Here's a double medal. Not from the queen, but from the community. Do you know what I mean? All that stuff's, all those systems are crumbling down too, which is amazing and great. So back to that. So I remember teasing my mum and dad years ago. My mum and dad were buggers. I mean, they raised me tough. Boy, were they strict parents. And I absolutely love and adore them. And we're very close today. But I remember saying to them years ago, right, when you two get old, I'm putting you in a home and that's it. And I meant it. Like, I friggin' meant it. And I joke about it, but I was like, yeah, and they were neither offended or they didn't care, they would just laugh at. But I have a sister and two brothers, and my poor little sister, she's 10 years younger than me. She unfortunately at 19 was living in the house with our grandparents, my grandparents, her grandparents, and a great aunt. And my poor sister witnessed our great aunt going doolally. Her brain starts, because there's a lot of things that people don't understand. An old person, their brain will, some people, it rewinds. It starts to rewind. They start to go back into memories of a child. They think they're 4 years old. They're trying to get out of bed, dance around. They're pooping in the bed and they're throwing their poo. They're eating their poop. They are rewinding. And these are some areas too that people kindly be aware of. It doesn't mean it's going to happen to your parent, but and then she passed away, and then my poor grandmother, my nan, our beloved nan Jean, she started hitting full-on Alzheimer's, dementia, and it was so stressful for my sister because she was there too. And my poor grandmother, she passed, and then my grandfather went into a home, and then my sister moved in with my great auntie Pam, who was just a matriarch, really. And my sister went through witnessing that too. So that child has been through so much of this, what we're talking about, the different layers and levels. But back to my initial question, again, we're just trying to share stories and give some balance here. Did your father have full comprehension and awareness that you were actually changing his diaper, say after he pooped, because he couldn't go to the toilet by himself? How was that?
Yeah, it was actually very funny. I totally forgot that I had to change his diaper,
Oh.
and I totally and so when the caregiver leaves, she says, now remember, he needs his pants changed about such and such a time. And I went, you just put clean pants on him. I'm thinking pants. And she goes, Jackie, his diaper. And I went, oh crap. Now I had changed my mother's diaper, but she's a woman. I had changed my grandmother's. I had changed all my kids. Wow. But it's like, crap, I have to change my dad. So when it came time to do that, I went in, and my dad was brilliant till the day he died. I mean, he was so aware of everything. And so I go in, I said, Dad, I got to change your diaper. And he got this look on his face like, oh God, because I'd never seen him in his entirety. Right. Yeah. And he said, no, just wait till tomorrow. No. I said, Dad, it's 6 o'clock right now. She's not going to be back until 9 o'clock. We're not doing that. You could get sick. You could get an infection. And so I said, all right, this is what you do. You just close your eyes and pretend I'm a really cute nurse. It'll all be over quick. So I tried to do it the way I had seen her do it. And I got one side connected, but then when he rolled back over, there was a big space of skin showing. And so I'm like, oh, crap, what do I do? And I ran and got the electrical tape and I taped them together. And I just died. But I learned how to do it correctly. But so one of the things that I learned the next day, I had her show me. I said, okay, show me. She goes, it's not that hard. You just have to do momentum. And I go, well, I was afraid he was going to fall off the bed. So what she did is she had a clean diaper on him. So she did it without taking the clean one off. She rolled him, she put a new one under him, she rolled him back. There was the diaper. And I said, he doesn't move at all in the middle of the night, right? And she goes, yeah, no, he just lays prone. I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. Going forward, when you change him before you leave, I want you to put 3 clean diapers underneath him so that I can get the old one off. I just can't get the new one on. And so he was like my prince on a pea, only it was a prince on the diaper. It was just, I had layers, and every night I could take off the old one and then the new one just went right on. So those are some of my hacks for taking care of an old person with diapers.
That is incredible. Wow, wow, wow. So when it came to kind of like lifting him and moving him in general, and we're talking about the last 2 years of his life, you know, and the decline of health, mental health and wealth, etc. What were the absolute biggest challenges in terms of physical, but also emotional for you?
So, like I said, I had the woman come for a few hours every day. So she got him out of bed, she bathed him, she, got him dressed. She would move him to a chair so he could sit there all day and then reverse it and go back. So I didn't have to do any of that physical stuff, the real heavy, because I couldn't. He was just dead weight. But the emotional piece for me was just watching this brilliant, sweet man lose everything. He's losing his eyesight. He can't read anymore. So I got him books on tape. He can't hear anymore. So I finally figured out if you put earphones on him, he can watch TV and listen. But, he was such a vital human being. And not once in all those years did he ever complain that he was bored, that he was in pain, that this was crappy. Not once. He accepted this journey, and I didn't accept it for him, but he accepted it for himself. And I asked him one day, Dad, how do you do this? You spend your entire day in a chair with your eyes closed, and I know what he was doing. He was going back in time in his memory, he was reliving his life. And he said, you just don't know until you're faced with it. And I said, yeah, I know. I'm going to be a real crab. I'm going to be a real witch if this is me at your age. No, I'm not going to be very pretty. and he would laugh and he goes, you just never know. But I think the biggest emotional piece for me having him was learning who he was to his soul, not just my dad, not just the man that loved me, who went to work every day and saved all the money for his kids. He was a very spiritual human being and a very grateful person. I would walk in the morning and he'd be laying there in bed looking at the ceiling, and he'd see me, he'd smile, he'd go, hi, honey. And I go, hi, Dad. I go, how you doing? He goes, I'm ready for another day. And I think, another day? He wanted to live to 100. He lasted till almost 97. And he would tell me, I'm going to live to 100. And I'd go, oh my God. but, I think, having him in my life, when I brought him into my life, in my home, I was in a really dark place. I'd been taking care of my mom all that time.
Wow.
And lost her to a really horrific death. She became sepsis with all this other stuff. My husband had just left me. I had 4 teenagers who were angry at their dad, but taking it out on me. I was having a great pity party. I was just a very angry person inside and out. And bringing my dad into my life in this intimate way taught me about living a life of gratitude. Stop looking at the negative. Where can we find the positive? And he brought a new dimension to my faith. I always struggled being Catholic. I love the idea of Christ and his teachings, or Jesus and his teachings, and how to live a life. But some of the stuff that we all know that goes with Catholicism, as a kid, I just couldn't buy into. But for me. And so having him with me completely altered the course of my life going forward. He really changed me and how I want to be in this world, how I want to present myself in this world. And I would have never had that if I didn't bring him in.
Oh, Jackie, that's so beautiful. Jackie, that is so So beautiful that you, I mean, you know, you just said you were having a pity party because your husband had left you. You have 4 teenagers who were devastated and heartbroken and taking it out on you, not their father. That your dad is in decline and everything else is going wrong. I don't really think that you can justify saying, you know, a pity party. I think anybody listening to that hell of a pressure on every level would have some sympathy, because that is everything hitting you in the heart all at the same time. Parent, husband, spouse, and children all at once, and teenagers. Holy God, let's run for the hills and just drink a beer all day. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, no, you were justified in definitely feeling sorry, but and look at that, Jackie, the human spirit, the human compassion, the human ability to love, despite what's happening, that you were able to come out of this journey with all this positivity and then pour yourself into, you know, you've written many books, many beautiful books. This one in particular is obviously our focus, but of course, I hope that people will look at your other bodies of work too. My Life in a Tutu, for example. And we started this broadcast with sharing how you and your daddy would dance together. And obviously, you know, you are an amazing dance teacher to so many little girls in tutus for so many years. I mean, you've had such an amazing, incredible life. And I just think it's so wonderful that you knew the joy, the power, the exuberance of life from a very young age and through your teens and your young adult, you know, going into marriage. And yet at the end, you had to like shut everything down, literally shut everything down. And when you would sit there from 3 p.m. until 9 the next morning, and you were unable to have lovers and visitors, and the house smelled like old people, you know, there is a smell. I mean, I hope no one's offended. If you are, so sad, too bad, because we have to acknowledge this as ways to get through those smells too. When you have to deal with your kids coming to and realizing that there's an identification missing, one of the children's bedrooms isn't there anymore. And it's just a sentimental thing, really. But, you know, and being shut down for that long, I mean, did you, despite the fact you came out on a high and you're sharing this body of work and knowledge and experience, which is so needed, it's so needed right now. And part of doing this broadcast is for people to think, I'm going to go get my mom out of that home. I'm going to go bring my dad home. I'm going to love them. I'm going to pour love into them for the rest of their lives as much as I can. Again, because there's a systemic pandemic happening with our elders being abused, being isolated, being ignored, not being touched, having to see people through windows. No, you get to choose. You are in control. Authorities are not. Governments are not. You are. That's your parent. That's your loved one. That's your relative. That's your friend. You want to go get them, you go get them. And this is part of why we're doing this. And Jackie's sharing her information, her real-time situations, up and down, up and down, up and down. And as she's sharing, there was a 2-year period where her life wasn't her life as it had been, you know. And so, Jackie, I want to ask you again, on an emotional level, despite coming out all of this on a positive, and you don't regret that you ever did it, talk about the low times that you had to handle, the depression that you went through, the withdrawal people had from you. What was your coping mechanism, other than wine, through that?
A lot of wine. You know, as women, sometimes we just put our heads down and plow through, right? You just, you don't think that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It's just, I just got to get through another day, another day, another day. And I got to a very dark place. I will admit it. You know, it was probably over a year into this thing. And he would want to talk at 1 a.m. You know, he'd fall asleep at 7, but then at 1 a.m, he's wide awake and want me to come in and talk to him. And so I wasn't getting a lot of sleep. But this one night I went in to check him and he was sound asleep. I was so tired. I was so tired and out of my mind with everything. I looked at him and I thought, no one would ever believe I suffocated this man. You know, he's old, he's 95, 96. You know, they would just think he died. He wouldn't even be able to struggle, right? Because, well, one arm doesn't work and he wouldn't be able to really struggle. I literally picked up a pillow and it was about what you think God is in my head is, excuse me, what are you doing? And I remember just going, oh my God, what am I doing? And I fell to the floor and I sobbed and I prayed and I prayed. And I just said, Jesus, I need help. I have no help. I need help. I need, I need, I need something here. And I also realized right now it was the hardest thing I'd ever been through in my life. But I knew that when it was over, I would want him back. You know, no matter how hard it gets, when they're gone. And you don't get it back, right? And it was interesting. The very next morning, I open up the newspaper and I see this ad in the newspaper for a hospice organization that is all about end of life care, not dying, but end of life care. And it was geared more towards the caregiver than the patient,
Right.
because he was still very healthy. He was
Right.
still very, very healthy. So I called them and they came out, and it was a life changer for me, huge life changer for me. You know, they were support for me where I could call on the phone and to that point on, I just realized we're gonna get through this.
Right.
We'll get through this. And I put all the anger, the fear, the fatigue aside, because now I had some help.
Wow. Jackie, as you were going into that most important expression of where your energy was, made me cry. Really feel for you. And it's important, again, you know, it's difficult to talk about this. You know, it doesn't mean that you're abnormal, and people really have to understand that, you know, you were at a point in life where you were so overburdened, everything was shut down, there was no life. Your dad, you know, could have so easily, you know, you could have put that pillow over his face, and you did have that thought. And, you know, of course, we never would encourage that, but I just want people to know that these are some of the thoughts that you go through, like normal. It's normal. It's not abnormal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a therapist. As a therapist, we're like, oh, if there are any suicidations or ideations of suicide or this or that, that's not normal. Report them. It is normal. We have to sometimes go through all of the feelings, all of the emotions, to really almost bring ourselves back online with us. So could you please go back there? You went, because that's where the internet went down, is you went to beside his bed and you had the thought that it'll be so easy if I just put this pillow over your face.
Yeah. I mean, I just picked up this pillow and I stretched it so it was nice and tight, and I was lowering it over his face, and it just got right before his face when I realized, oh my God, what am I doing? And I needed to, I just dropped to the floor in tears. And I had, other than this woman that came, she really wasn't any help. I began taking care of her too, because she was having issues with her family and issues with herself. So I was taking care of her as well as my dad. And I just was so lost. And I just prayed and prayed, I need help. I knew that when my dad was gone, I would miss him terribly. And I didn't want to miss out on any more moments because I was tired or angry or fearful, or I wanted so desperately to enjoy the time that I had with him. And I just prayed, I said, I need help. I don't know where it's going to come from. And then the next day I opened up the newspaper and found this article about a hospice organization that was all about, more about the caregiver than the patient, because they looked at it as end of life care, not care for the dying. And at the end of life, you've got caregivers that need it just as much. So I hired them, and they came in and they saved me, you know, for the next year or so. They saved me. And when things were towards the end, when things were shifting, they understood what was happening. And so they were able to guide me through his transition as he slowly transitioned. I didn't know I thought, what's going on here? Because he started to talk. The dying can have a language that they're not conscious of, but it's a way to let their loved ones know that they're leaving. And he would say all these, you know, like, I'm going to build a driveway and it's going to go straight up and I'm going for a ride. And I think, like, what? And so when more and more of this conversation was happening, I was able to talk to the social worker at the hospice, and she goes, he's letting you know he's dying. And I was just like, what? No. I don't want him to. Now we had gotten to a place where it was so wonderful. I didn't want him to leave. I didn't want him to die. But he's preparing you. So go along for the ride, you know? just enjoy the journey, because you're being given a gift here, and his death was so beautiful. It was everything I wanted for him. If I had known when my mom was sick and in the hospital what I knew now, she would not have died in that hospital. I would have brought her home, because there are services that can help you in the home. She could have been in her own bed. We could have all been there with her. But I didn't know. Now I do.
Yeah. You didn't know. You can't know what you don't know till you know it. And then you can't look back.
Yeah.
Punish yourself and have regrets because you had no idea. And we have to bless that. We have to let that go. Love that. We did the best we could at the time with the information that we had, and so be it. So be it. So continue. So this is so beautiful. Just want to go back a little bit just while we're coming up to his actual passing moments, because the preparation that you're gifting to people is priceless, Jackie. Absolutely priceless. This is why I know it's so important for us to do this beautiful broadcast. And thank you so much for being one. If you could give a little bit more information to people who are with people who are at end of life that they don't realize, what other things do they do? Do they say? How do they act? Like, what else is happening? Are they eating? Are they peeing, pooping? Are they like, go into all of that, please.
So with my father, he was very healthy. Well, he was healthy till the end, actually. It was just, but he was dying. It was probably, well, one of the first things I noticed where I thought, what is he doing? Like at 2 a.m, I could hear him talking to somebody. And so I'd get up out of bed and I'd go down, and he would be reaching for the window and talking. And I'd stand there and watch him. I didn't know who he was talking to, but then finally I would gently interject, and he would come back to reality, and he'd say, "Oh, my watch is broken." And I said, "Dad, I can fix that." But I could tell he was talking to his mother. He was either talking to my mother. He would know he was talking to family members. And then more of these conversations would happen. So, one day he had to talk to my Uncle Bill, and we had found a new caregiver. So the caregiver, like I mentioned, she was a sweet, sweet woman, but she was falling through the cracks. The caregiver needed caring, and she was not showing up on time. And I still had to do the things I had to do, or she wouldn't show up at all. And so I had to let her go. And we found another caregiver that was just the most beautiful man. It was great for my dad to have a guy, right? Not just a woman, but a man who believed in him. My dad wanted to walk. He hadn't walked in 7 years. And his name was Junior. And he would work with my dad every day and train him. And bless this man's heart, my dad walked before he died. He had to hold him under his arms, but his legs were working, which was so sweet. But so he said to Junior, "I need to talk to my brother Bill." And Junior knew the family history. And he goes, "Well, how old is your brother?" And he said, "He's probably 104 now." And Junior's like, "Okay, well, how do I get a hold of him?" And then my dad would come back to the reality and go, oh, never mind. So the way the hospice organization talked about it, it's a foot in, a foot out. When they're letting you know, we always think, oh, it's dementia, or it's drugs, or it's this. And it can be, but if you listen carefully, if you really listen carefully, they are trying to communicate with us on a soulful level. So there was that. And then one day, the one that really touched me was one day he wore a blue suit for all the religious occasions in our life, my wedding, baptisms, first Holy Communions, all that kind of stuff. And he hadn't worn it since my wedding, which was 29 years before. And so he said, we need to get my blue suit cleaned, and I want this special shirt pressed, and I want this specific tie. And I said, "Why, Dad?" And he goes, "I'm going for a drive." And I said, "Okay." And so this is where the hospice was so great. They said, "Don't negate it, play with it, see where it's going," right? And I said, "Okay, Dad, well, where are you going to go?" And he goes, "Well, I'm going to get all dressed up, and then Junior and I are going to go for a drive. And we're going to drive to the living room, which is right around the corner." I'm like, "Okay." And he goes, "But then I have to rest. Then I'll have to rest." I'm like, "Okay, Dad." And then he goes, "And then we're going to open the door, and I'm going to go for a drive." And he pointed to heaven. And I was just like, you are leaving me, you are leaving me. And then there was a day I came home from work, and we were talking about work, and we are talking about, how I could make more money, because I couldn't make any money right then. And out of nowhere, he's looking at the wall and he goes, "Who is that?" And I said, "What are you looking at, Dad?" He goes, "Who's that woman?" So I got up and I walked around to the side of him, and I'm looking at the wall, and I go, "I don't know, Dad, who does she look like?" And she goes, "She looks like your mother." And I said, "Dad, it is Mom. They're all waiting for you." But I would always tell him early on, when you're ready to go, you're not ready, that's fine. But when you are, they're waiting for you. And then he closed his eyes, and that was the week he went downhill. After that, every day I lost a huge piece of him, where he slept more, wasn't eating. They knew he was in transition, but the nurse would come every day. She goes, there's no signs. There's no bluing of the fingertips. He still has urine output. The body's still functioning, but he's definitely in a decline. And I had to go away. This was the hardest thing in the world for me, but I did it mainly to help my older brother make peace with my dad, because, sometimes fathers and sons have things that they go through. And I had to go down to Los Angeles to do something for my older daughter on Thursday. And Dad knew about it the week before. He was always like, "Go," and David, my older brother, was going to come and be with him. And I had also intuitively knew to call Tim, my next brother, "Why don't you come for the weekend? Let's all be together for the weekend, because I'll be back." And even called my youngest brother, who unfortunately we don't have a relationship anymore, and let him know, "When I come back, we'll all be together and, spend time with Dad." And so when I was getting ready to go, he started getting very scared and started throwing up and said, "You can't leave me. You can't leave me." And I stayed with Dad. I missed my first plane, but the social worker has said to me, "He will not leave unless you're in the room. So if you have to make this trip, go make your trip, because he will not leave unless you're in the room with him." And so I left, but I told my father, I said, "I'm going to be back." I was going to be back Sunday night. I'm going to be back early Saturday morning. So I did. And that gave my brother time with him, to make peace with them, to have a few little conversations. And when I got back, the caregiver was there. Both my brothers were there, and all three men couldn't change his diaper. They were all struggling. I'm like, "Hey, come on, you guys, you can do this." But I walked in, and my dad looked at me, goes, "I don't want to do this anymore. I want to go back." I said, "Okay." I said, "Okay, Dad." And then from then on, it was the 24 hours of the dying process, where things are shutting down. He's not eating anymore. He's not drinking. The urine output is virtually nothing. He never had any bluing of the fingertips, but he was getting deeper and deeper into that coma state. And then on Sunday, the gurgling started. They call it a death rattle. And there's a gurgling that happens. They don't have the strength to get the phlegm up and back down, and it's kind of rattles in there. And so hospice, they didn't come, but they were on the phone, and they would guide me with the morphine and what do I do next. And so I was able to be hands-on with him. And then it got to be about 5 o'clock in the afternoon that Sunday, and my second brother managed to stay. My older brother had to go, and he loved the Giants, and they were in the World Series. And if they won this game, they won the World Series. So hearing is the last thing to go. Even though that you think they can't hear you, they hear everything. And so I said to my brother, "Let's put the headphones on and let him listen to his last game." So we put the headphones on. We couldn't hear the game, but I'm sitting next to him, and my brother's got his face up on the TV. And like I said, I get these voices in my head, and I heard my higher self or whatever say, "Take off the headphones and talk to him." And I was just like, "What do I say?" And it said, "Just talk to him." So I took off the headphones, and I wrapped him in my arms. My brother wasn't even aware I was doing this. And I held him, and I gave him permission to leave. And I said, "Dad, I know why you're still here. I was the only girl, and we were very close. And I said, you're here because of me." And I said, "But I'll be okay. I'll be just fine. I will love you, and I'm going to miss you, but I'll be fine." And he took a breath and left. And I was just like, wait a minute, I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it happened so fast. Like, wait a minute, come back here.
Yeah, I was just kidding. I was just kidding, Dad.
Just kidding. But it was so beautiful. And in that moment, the 9 years before that were so hard. And it wasn't always hard, but it was hard. It was all worth it. You know, all of it was worth it. To know that I gave this man a peaceful, loving environment to go home with. He wasn't in some sterile place where nobody talks to you. I mean, it's bad enough the smells of him, but the smells of those places are just awful. You know, these people are doing their job. Some do it beautifully, some don't. Some are, you know,
Sociopaths.
dark souls. Yeah. But it was what he wanted. And I was able to keep the promise.
Oh, Jackie, we froze up a little bit there.
And so it was, I know it's not something to ever fight with me about it. Are you there?
Yeah, you froze up a little bit there.
Okay. Where do you want me to start?
Just continue on. You know, one thing I wanted to share with you was the image that, you know, when you came into the world, your daddy was probably one of, if not the first person to hold you in his arms. And that at the end of his life, you were the one holding him in your arms. I mean, beautiful, like beautiful transition. And sharing all of this, obviously it's just so emotional. I can't believe how emotional it's made me. I was fully prepared. I've read your book. I mean, I had a good old cry when I read your book, you know. That was a couple of years ago I read your book, and so I know the story. But even so, you know, when you the way you share it and the way that you open up ideas in our minds and you bring such truth, it is very emotional, you know. And I know we've touched on some really big subjects, like humanitarian subjects, loving subjects. So there he is, taking his last breath, passing away in your arms, which was a gift, an absolute gift. I have no question in my mind that the people that are with us at the end of our lives are the ones we choose unconsciously or consciously, for no particular reason, just that is a soul agreement that we make with them. And so right after his passing, I think he was starting to share a little bit of information there, how things kind of went down, how things were handled.
Oh, okay. Is that what you want me to pick up on? Okay. Did you get all the stuff before, or?
I think so. I'm not sure, but if there's anything you feel we should repeat, please go ahead and do so.
Okay. So to be able to give him the peaceful, loving death that he wanted, that I wanted for him, was such a gift. And like I said earlier, it changed me dramatically. And all those months, all those years that were hard, it was all worth it. It was so worth it at the end. And, you know, now he's gone, and I have to think about, okay, how is life going to be without him? And it was hard. The first year, I cried all the time because I missed him so much. And I found myself, every time I go to the grocery store, I went right to the Depends aisle. And it's like, oh, I don't have to buy those anymore. You know, for months and months, I was back doing what I did before, but oh yeah, he's not here anymore. And, you know, the first project I had to do was to clean up the room that he lived in, get rid of all the things, put fresh carpet in, fresh paint, fresh linens for my daughter so that she would have a room. And it was funny, he loved yellow. And so when he came to live with me, I painted the room an obnoxious yellow. It was horrible, but he couldn't see real well. But and then not even consciously, when I put it all back together again, the walls were now a pale yellow. I didn't even realize I was doing that. And now there was a pale yellow. But so going forward now, when you've lost someone, you're grieving, but now you've got to clean up the estate. You know, you've got to, oh, there's a will, we've got to figure out how to go through all of that. There's a funeral you have to plan. So I was the co-executrix with my older brother, mainly because of my youngest brother who can be violent. And so my older brother needed a buffer. So what his job was just to deal with the attorneys, but I did everything else. I planned the funeral, I planned the party. I wrote the obituary. I went to the banks almost every single day. I had to go to the banks. There was all this stuff. So for a whole year, it was like I didn't really get to grieve because I'm now in business mode. We got to clean this up. And so then finally, after a year, we were able to settle the estate. And I realized going forward, there's some changes I had to make for my children for when I go. I have written to them what I want at the end. This is our last chance. What do we want? And I said this to my dad at one point, how do you want this to look? And he goes, but I'm not dying yet. And I said, I know you're not. But when it happens, I want to make it happen the way you want. And so I've got plan A, B, and C of what I want and how it to look. So if I can't have A, well, then maybe we can do B, but definitely C. So, but I've also with the will, because the will itself, and people don't think about this, that's a very emotional, trying time. You've just lost someone, your heart is broken. You've lost someone, you're very emotional. And now you got to deal with the attorneys and the law and the this and that. It gets very cold again. And so what I did with my kids is I have only one child as the executrix, and she volunteered to do it. I asked for a volunteer. She's the only one that volunteered because it's a big job. Yeah. And so I said, your job will be to take everything to the attorneys, and that's it. The other three, one has to take care of the funeral, and she's in charge of all of that. The next one has to take care of cutting off the credit cards and the Social Security and, all the minutia. The other one deals with the banks and any property that I have. So they each have their specific jobs, and I've detailed in written form in my trust where things are, where the phone numbers are, because there was so much we couldn't find. And my dad tried so hard to make this an easy thing, but it was not easy. It got very complicated. So that's another thing I like to tell people about is think about how you want the end of your life. When I die, I want to be, if it has to be a hospital bed, fine. I want it on the deck of my cabin, with all the kids around me playing blasting music and a case of Rombauer Chardonnay. That's how I want to go out.
Yeah, you and your Rombauer, girl.
That's my A. That's my
A. Leave the wall with a glass of wine in hand and a family in the other.
Yeah, and they're all dancing and singing, and everyone's around, and I'm surrounded by my beautiful trees. That's how I want to go out.
Amazing, amazing. And is there a particular song that you have in mind for your celebration of life as you actually physically transition?
I've got several that I love. Trying to think of what I mean, I can hear them in my head. I can't think of the titles of them, but gosh, I wish I could remember. But I do have a couple of them that I just love. Sorry, I can't think of them right now. It'll come to me when I leave.
You're in my head, like I did it my way.
I think one of the ones I love is The Time of My Life, and I've forgotten who the This Is the Time of My Life.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's so beautiful, so wonderful. Wow, wow, wow. So it's amazing the subjects that we've covered that most people don't want to think about, they want to avoid, they can't think about, they're too worried, it's too much, I don't know how. And so what you've gifted there is a very simple and straightforward 4-point plan to write down and somehow execute if they decide to. And as you and I know, sometimes there's no preparation for death. As you know, my beloved, beautiful Jeff, my fiance died very suddenly last year. We planned the rest of our lives together. We were putting off sorting out all of the stuff that you would plan for as becoming married, etc., and all of that. And there was no time. He died. So that you had time with your dad, that you took the time to talk to him when you could, that you, as young as you are now, have taken the time to mindfully prepare, because the stories that we hear about people that die and the mess they left behind, it's such a stress and and pressure, and we could so easily be kind and think and be thoughtful and think it's not about us, oh, I can't handle it, oh, I don't want to think about it. We've got to kind of get past that and think
Right.
about the other side of it. Let's just be grown-ups a little bit. Although I don't like being a grown-up at all, never have, never will, but sometimes we've got to be a little bit responsible here.
Right.
One of the other things that I've known you to do over the years, which I've so admired about you and your creative artistic self, is you have helped many people put together their entire memories, mum, dad, from when they knew mum and dad to mum and dad passing away, you know, or vice versa. This is a beautiful gift that you have, and you've helped people. I know people can come and ask you questions if they wish to, and you're open to that. But what would you say to people in terms of that? You know, someone dies, they're like, oh my God, I've got no pictures, I've got no this, no that. How would you advise them to prepare that now?
So we've lost the art of writing, you know, and I've done a lot of book tours where I've asked the audience, and many of the people in the audience are older. You know, how many of you journal? How many of you written things about your life? And so few people raise their hands. You know, long ago, that was the only way to communicate, you know, and I've got letters from my father that are, you know, single space, binder paper line, you know, back and front. And that's how I used to write. And this generation coming up, it's read and delete, you know, it's text, which is great, but nothing gets saved. And so what I encourage people to do, and one of the things that I tried to do with my end of life doulaship is really be a legacy doula, where when I'm with that dying person, I ask questions that the kids forget about. The kids maybe you've heard a million times, but there's a different layer that happens when you're leaving and this is a stranger who's truly interested in your life. The things that come out of them, I preserve them for the family, you know, because the dying person usually thinks, oh, you've heard it a million times, you know, they don't want to hear it again. But you're new, I'll tell you. And there's always things that come out where the kids will say to me, the adult children will say to me, I never knew that. But what I would suggest for people now is what I do. I write letters. We can all write a letter, right? You can type a letter. I write letters to my grandchildren, to my children, and I save them. They're in a box. They don't even have them right now. They're for when I go. And because I'm a writer, my kids have read all my work is about my life and my children and my thoughts and everything. But they're getting to the point like, oh God, yeah, we're too busy, Mom. We'll read that later, you know. But I save them. I put them in books and save them so that down the road they can go back and read these things and remember me, learn about our life together, learn about who I was. But for many people, we can all write a letter, right? And even if it's just one letter, and it's about your deepest, darkest fears, secrets, loves, whatever that you want them to know about, but you can't bring yourself to say right now. You know, I've just, it breaks my heart when I hear people say over and over again, I never asked the questions. And like my dad, if I didn't ask the questions, I would have never known anything.
Yeah.
And in those 9 years that we were together, the things I learned about this man, I just felt so privileged to be his daughter, you know, so privileged to be his daughter. But we have to ask the questions, right?
Exactly. I think what all of us humans have to do for our own self-preservation is to give ourselves, number one, permission to be able to separate the child-adult relationship. When our adult parent is at a place of no longer looking after us as little kids, giving ourselves permission to say, I am an adult, we are equals, we are matched, and I am going to be taking care of you and responsibility for you. Therefore, I have the permission and give myself the permission to ask you those questions and separate the long-term child-adult or parent-child relationship that was. And that's obviously what you did. With all the love and respect you still had for your daddy, you were then in a different position of now looking after him, changing his diaper, and then being able to bring him into alignment with, well, what is it that you need? And if you're a child that's in awe of her parent, oh no, I could never ask me. Oh no, like we've got to knock that off. We've got to step up for ourselves and the rest of the family and that parent that we're taking care of. You've got to stop thinking, oh, I can't be rude. Oh, it's so rude. It's so personal. Stop.
Right. No, exactly.
Right. More pain, more harm. We don't need it. None of us need it. Yeah.
And I know when I first started talking to my father about death, he was angry at me. And I just said, tough. I said, I need to know these things. You know, I need to know everything about you and what you need and what you want so that I can make it happen for you. And I've told, unfortunately, some of my daughter's friends have lost their family members. And they came to me, you know, when the mom was dying, and they didn't know how to talk to her because she was so angry. And I said, it's okay. She's not angry at you. She's angry at the situation. She's not ready to go. She wants to see you married. She wants to see you with children, but still ask the questions. And she may be angry that you ask the questions, and just sit there firm and say, I know you're angry with me right now, but this is important. I need to know this. Mom, there's mom or dad. There are things I need to know so that I can do right by you. And then when you can, you kind of approach it in that way, they soften. You know, my dad just turned into a puddle of, you know, Jello pudding. You know, he just was just like, oh, okay. You know, and then we had all these conversations because it wasn't happening now. It's not happening now, but
Yeah.
it will for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Wow, that's amazing. Jackie, just in closing, I would love for you to give a message to all of the adults, children who, you know, I mean, any child with a parent alive that they may not be speaking to right now for whatever reason, for whatever reason.
Mhm.
You as someone who's already lost a parent and you know what that feels like. What would you say to all of those, you know, children and adults that are ignoring a parent right now? What would you say to them?
It's obviously it's not easy. You know, it's a sacrifice, but you will not end the journey sorry that you did it. You know, you will, everyone that I've ever talked to, and even with parents that were difficult, you know, because let's face it, not everybody's easy. They were so glad that they hung in there to the very end because there's no regrets. You don't look back and go, oh, I should have done this, or I should have been there, or I should have called more. Let's get rid of the should haves and let's do. You know, let's just try to do. And the other thing too is not everybody can do what I did, right? All right, I was alone in a house that worked, and I was all alone. It worked perfectly, but there are things everybody can do in a family. You may not be able to change the diapers. You may not be able to physically be there, but like I help some people, you're good with the finances. You take over the finances. All right, you call on the phone, you know, write letters. Our older people love letters. They love cards. There's so many little things that everybody can participate in if you can't physically be the one there, even if they've got dementia. But I'll tell you, those letters bring them back to reality, even with Alzheimer's. For a moment in time, you've got them back, and
Yes.
then they fade away. But for a moment in time, they're right there with you. And that's so precious,
Yeah.
so precious.
And playing the music.
And
Yeah.
and we're a lot stronger than we give ourselves credit for. You know, we all think, oh, I can't do that. I won't do that. Well, you can do it. It's just whether you want to do it,
Mhm.
because we can all do it.
Yeah. A lot of reasons why people don't reach out to a parent is because they can't stand or bear the thought that that parent might reject them again if they've been rejected. But what I would say to you is this: it doesn't matter. You're not
Right.
going to be able to control the outcome. All you can do is control how you choose to feel about this situation. So let's say that you do take the courage and you do reach out to a parent and you leave a message, but they don't respond at all, or they respond in a very negative, unkind way. At the end of the day, what you did was you released all of that woulda, coulda, shoulda. And so when they do pass away, you're never going to look back and say, oh God, I wish I'd just made that one last call and taken the chance they would have rejected me. All right, that's so important to know. You do you. If you're a child with love for a parent, the parent's not available to you, just unload in a loving way. And then you can move on with your life. And as Jackie said, we don't look back with huge regrets.
Yeah.
Right? Any final words, my love?
No, I just, excuse me, for anyone going through this or about to go through this, I pray for you. You know, it's not easy. But it's a journey we all make. And so why not make it a beautiful journey? You know, and don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to do it. You know, don't be afraid that they're going to be angry. Don't be afraid it's going to be messy. It's a part of life. So, anyone, I encourage people at least to try. It may not work. Like if my dad had Alzheimer's, I don't think I could have done it. But at least try, at least for as long as you can do it, you know.
Beautiful. Jackie Haugh, author of The Promise I Kept. I love you so much. I'm so
I
proud
love
to
you.
be my friend.
Oh, I love you.
I'm so proud that we did this together. You know, this such important, and I just know that, you know, it isn't about the size of the channel. It's about the people that look and listen to the information, and that it touches their heart and gives them love and presence and understanding and more awareness, because that's what we all need right now. So
Yeah.
again, thank you, Jackie, so much. And to the people watching this, sending you so much love, just joy and gratitude in your space and in your face in all the right ways. Be strong, love yourself, give yourself permission to be you in the world, because you're amazing. You're amazing. All right, Dani, spiritual therapist, lots of love, and I see you soon.